Alright, hello, how's everyone doing? This is Kevin McCain, and today we're going to do a little watercolor. I've got my watercolor paints out over here, and I've got my brushes that I'm going to be using. I've got a piece of 300-pound Arches cold pressed watercolor paper. So this is 300-pound cold pressed. 300 pound is nice because you don't have to stretch it. I am going to be doing a painting of a golden delicious apple. I've got over here the different brushes that I'm going to be using. I basically have 3 rounds. I've got like a number 10. It's like another number 10. So I got two number 10s, and this is a number 6. As far as that goes, I have 2 flat brushes. I've got a 1/2 inch here, and I've got a 3/4 inch, and I've got a palette of watercolor paints. This is seems like quite a few. This is a limited color palette for many watercolorists. Many of them will use anywhere from 24 to as many as 36 or 40 different colors. So I still consider this somewhat of a limited palette. Obviously, you could even go more limited. But in terms of the colors I've got, this is a cad yellow lemon or cad yellow light, cad yellow deep, yellow ochre. This is raw sienna. This is cad red light. This is alizarin crimson. This is Theo rose, Theo violet. We've got we have 4 different blues, and we've got ultramarine blue, cobalt blue. This is another like cobalt over there. We then got phthalo blue, manganese blue. We then have sap green. We have hooker's green, viridian, Payne's gray, and this right here is burnt umber. There's some stray color down here. I don't even think it's on the screen, but it's just a Hansa yellow. I doubt I'll even be using that every once in a while. In terms of the palette itself, this is just a solid piece of solid surface. It's basically countertop material, and so it's it really likes water. So you can put water down, and it really doesn't beat up like it does on plastic. Some of the best surfaces that you can use are this is a really nice one. You can also use any sort of porcelain coated material. So you can go to Home Depot, get a 12-inch by 12-inch white porcelain coated tile, like you'd put on your kitchen floor, and you use the glazed side. The glazed side is the porcelain side, and again, porcelain loves water, and so that's a great thing. You can go to any sort of thrift shop and get a porcelain plates will work in a pinch. You can even I had a student that brought me in a 12 by 12 tile that was made out of marble, and it's white marble, but with that white marble you can't do the side, you don't use the side of the marble that you'd normally put face up for your kitchen, because it has a glaze on it to keep it from absorbing water, and so the water beads up. And so what you do with that marble is you turn it over where it's the cut side and it's unfinished, and you use that cut side. And those are some great, they're much better than any of whether it's the porcelain or whether it's this solid surface stuff, or even if it's a piece of marble or stone or something. Those are some of the best surfaces. The ones that you get out of the stores that are plastic, you don't want to use those. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. Again, there's a picture is in with the file of the apple that I'm going to be using, and you can pull that up, print it out, pull it up on your screen. What I want you to do with this, I want you to watch me paint the apple, and then I'd like you to try to paint the apple. So that's why you have the reference. You can put out your paints and try to paint the apple as well. Now you don't have to have the same colors I've got, but even if you had just one yellow and like a cad yellow medium and there's actually cad yellow deep and yellow ochre and maybe alizarin crimson and phthalo rose and ultramarine blue and phthalo blue, and then your brown and your Payne's gray. That would work as well. That would be even a more limited palette, and it works really, really well. It's just as you get into more intermediate painting, especially, we start using again a larger palette, because with watercolor you have colors that are staining, you have colors that are non-staining, you have colors that lift, you have other colors that don't lift, and as you do glazing and stuff like that, you're going to want some different colors. Like I might use a different color because of its staining properties and such, and that's why watercolors use so many more colors. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to start by painting in the background and the table, and we're really here to paint the apple. So I'm going to keep the background and the tablecloth no more than 2 values tops. Now the back of this this apple is on a white, a white wall. It's not bright white, but it's white-esque, ivory or something. So it's fairly neutral. So I'm taking a little bit of Payne's gray and burnt umber, because if you mix those together, you're going to get a very neutral sort of color. Now the temperature of the light is actually a little bit of a yellow-orange. Is the temperature of light. That means the light itself has a lot of yellow orange to it, and so I want just a touch of that in there. And I still think this is too bright, so I'm going to dull it down with a little bit of my Payne's gray, put a little bit more of the yellow in there, and this is still too dark to see what the color is, because with watercolor sometimes it's very hard to judge. Touch against the paper. And then you could, just touch a little bit there and, kind of check it out. I'm trying to take it off, like, what's it going to look like when it's dry? This has a definite red color to it, and I don't think I like that. So, well, it's not that I don't think, I know I don't like that. So, I'm going to grab a little more yellow. And I'm going to grab a little more yellow, and I'm going to add a whole lot more water. Okay, so I think this is probably just enough. You probably can't see it yet, but I've got just this little small area that we're going to paint with the apple. And so it's not. I still need enough watercolor to cover it. It didn't seem like I had enough, so. Now, one thing about watercolor, now it happens more in the darks than it does in the lights, is it gets lighter as it dries. Now again, it's more noticeable with your dark colors and your light colors like this. This is may lighten a little bit, but it's not going to lighten a ton. I'm going to use this little round. Oh, it's got color in it. Dang it. Let's try that again. I'm going to use this little round to kind of go around the gonna make my brush a little thirsty. I've got a paper towel here I'm using just out of the window, or off to the right of the video. Okay, that's cut in. Now I'll come back to putting in this wash. You don't want to leave anything long enough that it creates a water line. That's a big no-no. I'm gonna also introduce some more water. I've got some water just over here to this side that I'm pulling from, in case you're wondering, hey, isn't there supposed to be water in this watercolor? Yes. So I want to put some more water down here. Alright. A little on the pink side. I'm going to grab a little bit more yellow. And I'm going to add, I don't know how I picked up some blue. There's some blue that got put down there. Alright, so this is roughed in the background, and it's really quite light. It's just a light little bit of color. I'm going to go ahead and use a little paper towel, and I'm just going to take off some of that water, and I'm also going to see if I can maybe lighten this up just a little bit more so that I have, again, just a little bit more, you know, pulling some of that paint off. I just don't want it too light. So, let's see. Well, so we'll go ahead and put that down. And then take that back off. So then I'll put some pigment down, but not too much. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, boy, wouldn't this have been nice to actually get this side to line up with that side. And I didn't do it when I was drawing, but now I can see it, so I want to make sure that probably should have checked that. And you could use a straight edge to check it. You could take your little brush and try to line it up and try to figure out if that's, I'm gonna get a water line there if I'm not careful. Don't want that. Alright, so we're just gonna leave that there. Now, with watercolor you have to jump around a little bit. So this is all wet, so I don't want to be doing the apple. And it's also wet where it's going to meet the tablecloth. Now the tablecloth is black, and so I'm not going to work there. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to work in the cast shadow. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up. I'm going to pretty much use Payne's Gray, just straight Payne's Gray. Maybe even a little bit of this in here, make it a little more on the violet side. So we're going to grab a little Payne's Gray. Need enough paint for it to actually, that's the one thing, sometimes we don't know how much paint to do it now to use, and we have to, when we're doing darks, of course we have to make sure that we do have enough paint, and that comes with time. Now you can let your watercolors dry out. I let my watercolors dry out all the time, and that's so that when they're right out of the tube, sometimes you'll get this flick of watercolor that as you drag it will leave these lines and stuff. And if you want to do that, that's fine, but most times you don't. So if you're trying to do a flat wash, it can be a nightmare. So you want to make sure that you've got, you know, it worked in so you don't have any little bits of pigment. And now I'm going to fill this in. Trying to decide. Usually you want to use the biggest brush you possibly can to cut in or around stuff. But this flat may not do as well, so I'm grabbing my number 10 round, and I'll use this to line. Let me see if I can get in here, so I can come in and around that apple. Like so. Alright, and then we're going to hurry up, because for the larger part I don't need that. You know, that was just to put it in around where it was very hard to get in there with a big brush. And now I'm just using this 1/2 inch flat to finish off the rest of this cast shadow. Now I'm going to wet this down a little bit because it's gotten where we're getting lap lines because there's not very much water there. So I'm going to kind of re-wet this entire area. Watercolor is really about water, and many times we think that if we got less water somehow we'll be able to control it more, and nothing could be further from the truth when we're talking about watercolor. The less water you've got, the harder it is to control, and the easier it is to mess things up. And so again, I'm just, this is going to start to get some blooms and stuff because I'm going to try to, blooms are where it starts to, you know, kind of look like little flowers because you're putting more water where there's less water. And I'm putting this down, so I need to re-wet the whole area in order for me to be able to then move the watercolor around. If I don't do this, it'll, I'll start to have lap lines and water lines and all kinds of issues. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in here with a bigger, oh, no, I'll get my flat. Grab my flat, grab a little bit of this, and we're going to come in here, we're going to try to place a little more flat washes down here. Also distributing some more paint. Because it's wetter, allow me to drop some stuff in a little bit. I'll have a little more control over what I can do with my paint here. I'm dropping in here to a couple places where it's a little lighter, and I could just go ahead and let that flat wash dry down. I can also try to see if I can get this to bleed a little bit. So I'm going to grab a little bit of water and I'm going to go along this edge. Whoops. Like so. And so now I can pull this out a little bit, soften this edge. Now I also it bled in because there was so much more water there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put some paint back down there. So if this isn't working, I might have to re-wet the whole area again and start to drop paint back into it. So again, better to re-wet an area than it is to just kind of hope or pray or something like that it's going to do what you want, because most likely it's not going to. And so you want to be able to control it a little bit more. All right. And now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to try to see if I can do some of it over here. I'm just trying to soften the edge. That's all I'm doing. Okay. So the edge isn't quite so hard. Like so. And well, let's see, we need to kind of firm this one up a little bit, didn't kind of a little. All right. Again, we've got a little bit more of a bleed there. Let's go ahead and see if we can work with this. I'm going to go ahead and now I want to make sure that I don't have too much water in here. So I'm blotting this down so I have a semi-wet brush, and I'm going to put sort of a glaze over the top of everything, sort of another flat wash. And I'm trying to do this to try to get the watercolor to move, to wet it down so it will move like watercolor. So, and then again I can get a brush, pull most of the water out of it, so there's just a little bit of water, and come in here and soften just along that edge. Right. Like so. And again, if I wanted to soften a little bit more, again, I could take and make this a thirsty brush and come along this edge again to try to soften this edge by making it lighter a little bit along that edge. Because what will happen is if you don't, a lot of times it'll push the pigment out to the end, and it creates again a very, very sharp water line. And if I don't want that, I've got to come in here and maybe we'll call this babysitting your edges. And so you're going to come on over here and try to... Now that maybe got a little too thirsty, so we're going to take a little bit of paint and drop it back down in there, like so. And you got to be careful of that, because if it's too wet, again, it'll give you a bloom. Okay. Alright, so we're going to let that set up a little bit. So the other part of watercolor is really knowing when something is dry, and the way you'll do it is you'll feel it with the back of your hand, and if it feels like it's still cool to the touch, that means it's wet. You want to leave it alone. If you feel it and it's the same temperature here as it is there, that means it's not wet and you can go in. This is still wet. Instead of grabbing a hair dryer or something like that, we're just going to give this a couple minutes, and we'll be back, and then we'll start going into these areas. All right, we're going to get back to it now. We're going to go ahead. We've let this dry down, and so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to paint the rest of the table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my brush in here, I'm going to fill it with water, and I'm going to very gently. Oh, I still got some remaining paint. Well, that's not a big deal because I'm going to be filling this in anyways, but I'm going to wet down the entire area, including the shadow. I'm going to grab a round brush because I need to cut in around this shape. Oh, look at there. That's got stuff in it too. Try that again. Alright, so we'll go ahead and cut in and around that. I don't know if I'm... Yeah, okay, good. Got it in there. Wasn't sure. I was like, I can't tell. I'm a little further away from this, and there's a little corner there that I wasn't sure if I got it wet or not. Thank goodness I did. Alright. So again, we're going to go ahead and wet this down. I'm going to wet this down back here, and I'm also going to I want to make sure that I'm at an angle when I'm doing this, because I don't want to lift that paint. If I'm not careful, if I had my brush up and down like this, you know, well, you probably can't see that, but if I had my brush straight up like so, it's going to take off more paint, and we don't want to take off paint. We just want to be able to wet down the area. Probably should be doing this with a bigger brush, but luckily it's not that large of an area. Okay. Now you can check to see what's glistening and what's not, because that will tell you where your water is. If it's flat and not glistening, it doesn't have any paint. So again, I can come over here. Let me get my thinner brush. My number, was it 4 or 6? And I'm like, well, that has some in it, but no big deal. And that's not a huge deal because I need it to be wet, and it's going to have that same color in it, so thank goodness. Alright, so that's actually fairly wet, almost too wet, but we're going to go ahead and put some more water down. And try to re-wet this entire area. Yeah, it's really wet. Now what I'm going to do while this, because again this is very wet, we're going to mix up, I should have done this first, but I'm doing it now. I'm going to look up there, and there's a lot of warmth because there's a lot of there's yellow orange in that light. It's mixing with the it's mixing with the light values of the tablecloth, and so the tablecloth has a lot of orange in there. It's got to be dark, but it's got to have a little bit of that. I guess I could be using my burnt umber. I don't know why I was doing it the other way, but anyways, I can, you know, add quite a bit of, again, that's the red. The red's taken over a little bit. We want a little bit more. There we go. So this tablecloth, it's got a lot of blue in it because it's got a yellow-orange light. The lights are, you know, have this orange tinge to them. And so I'm going to go ahead and look at how this, yeah, that's so much water. So I'm going to take some water off this surface. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to let gravity kind of help me. I'm going to move this over a little bit so I can take this and let the water pool in one corner. I take an absorbent paper towel. I'm going to hit that and take that big puddle out. There we go. And I'm going to let that kind of go back down. Now I need to kind of get this position back where it was, or what? Get this position back where it was. But there we go. Okay, cool. So now that we got a lot of that excess water off of there, again, I'm going to start putting in this color. Still a lot of water on here. If I was wanting it to go really flat, again, I'd probably wait a little bit longer to let some of the water soak in and dissipate a bit. But I don't think it's going to be that. I kind of like the really soft feel of this. And get some more of this tablecloth. Okay. This again is the warmth of this, you know, this tablecloth, like so. Oops. There we go. And now we're going to bring in a little bit more of the Payne's Gray, and so we're going to bring this in here. Getting a line there that I don't want, so I'm going to butt this up in there. Like kind of bleed over a little bit, soften that edge. Take this. Again, I'm dropping some more of the Payne's Gray in here, mixing it around. Okay. Now we're using really direct watercolor. I'm not going to be doing glazing with this watercolor. So it's really what we call direct. In other words, we're going to put it down and, oh shoot, that was a mistake. So I'm going to come back in here and see if I can pull that off. Like so. And let's see. There's a little bit of a haze that's going to stay there. Then I'm going to have to leave until the end of the painting, and then you can come in at the very end if you need to with a razor blade and take that back out. I'm using very dry paint here. It's almost dry brushing. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to put pigment back where I just pulled it out, but hopefully it's dry enough that it won't bleed back in there. I'm going to do some dropping in of paint in just a couple of areas. And then we're going to leave this alone for the most part. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and let this dry down, and then we're going to actually work on the apple. That's why we're doing this. So again, go ahead and get a drink, or get some water. I don't encourage people to use a hairdryer. When you use hair dryers, it exaggerates the texture as it dries. It also dries lighter. And so we're just going to let nature take its course and let this thing dry down. We'll come back and then we'll paint the apple, which is why what we're really here to do. We're not worrying quite so much about subtlety in the wall or subtlety in the tablecloth. So again, we'll come back and then we'll paint the apple. All right, so let's get back to it. So we've got this is dried down through here. Now we've got some strange things that happen. Sometimes that'll happen when you get a wash. Like there's these little lighter dots through there. There's sort of an edge through here. And sometimes people will, they'll be like, "Oh man, what am I gonna do? How can I correct it?" And really all it's gonna take is most likely if we put a nice flat wash down here, a second flat wash, a glaze. In other words, you can pull stuff together with another layer. So if I put another flat wash, I can then work into this and get rid of that stuff. And if I had to, I might do even a third layer. And so with watercolor, a lot of times people don't know how to proceed, or they'll have something that doesn't turn out so great the first time around. And when you've got something like that, the best thing to do is do it again, do a second layer. And a lot of times, if you do a second layer and sometimes a third layer, it just, it'll resolve all your issues, and you take a kind of a bad painting or something that you're really, kind of, dreading a little bit, and turn it into something that's, again, going to be a nice painting in the end. And so a lot of times, people have this idea that watercolor is the hardest medium, and that it's so unforgiving. And there are parts of watercolor that are unforgiving. But part of the thing that the watercolorist has to learn is how to roll with it. But there's a lot of parts of watercolor that aren't, unworkable. You can go over with it and glaze it with another layer, and you can glaze another layer again, and until you're happy with it. And so a lot of people don't realize that with watercolor. I might do that at the very last, but I don't want to do that right now because we're here to do the apple. Again, I don't care how great it's one of these things where the tablecloth turns out great, but the apple doesn't look right. It ain't gonna work. If I'm doing a portrait where the eyes aren't working, but the chin looks great, again, it's not gonna work. So we're gonna do the apple and try to make the apple work, and because that's really the most important part of this thing here. Now I'm over here off screen, and I'm trying to wash my brushes out, and I'm pulling out any extra scumming because I want to make sure that I can get as clean a yellows as possible. So again, I'm trying to clean up my brushes really, really well. And whenever you're done with your brushes, you'll wash them out with soap and water, and then you just make sure that you form them into a nice brush, just like you're setting your hair before it dries. Unless you want your hair all over the place. It's the same thing with your brushes, the watercolor brushes. And if you do that, your watercolor brushes will last a long time. If you don't do it well, good luck. That guy just wanted to get on out of here, I guess. He had other places to be. Just throwing stuff around over here. That's alright, trying to get it. Alright, so I think my brushes are good and clean. Alright, I know you probably say, well, why didn't you just do that off camera? Well, I want you to know that everyone's got to do this, and let you know this is what it takes, and that I have to do it too, just like everybody else. Okay, so before I get started with this with this apple, we're going to mix up the colors of the apple. Now the apple and the shadows, I can see the apple and the shadows gets it starts to get a little on the green side. I'm going to darken my yellow because this is a golden delicious apple. So we're going to darken this with a little burnt umber. Now I'm also finding that that's not enough, and so if I have to go darker, I'm going to use a little different method. Now if I've got a color wheel, and if you drew a straight line between green and orange, you're going to pass the yellow spectrum. And yellows in watercolor are the hardest to darken because of the fact they're so light. But we can use this method where we're going to take, this is my green, and this brown is a dark orange. And between green and orange is the yellow spectrum. So this won't give me a bright yellow out of the tube. It's going to give me a dark yellow brown. And I'm checking my colors over here to take a look at them. So this will be my shadow color. Got the green there. And I've got this brown again. Between green and brown is yellow. Now I'm going to keep this on the yellow green side, so it's going to have a little bit of green to it. That'll be my shadow color. Alright, and then I'm going to come on over here. I'm going to mix up sort of a middle value and then a light value. So my light value is, this is a little too yellow orange, and that's what this is, cad yellow deep, so it's a little bit too orange. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of what's called my lemon yellow, and between this lemon yellow and this orange yellow is the actual yellow for that apple. Now in the lights, usually your hues will shift. So if I've got yellow, it's going to shift either green or it's going to go orange. So in the really light lights on this apple, it goes a little bit on the red-orange side as it gets lighter. And in fact, there's and then we're gonna use some of the probably some of this yellow ochre over here as part of my yellows as well. That's a lovely color. And then we're gonna have like a medium color, and I'm gonna take a little bit of this red and this yellow, give me sort of a medium. Maybe I'll take a little bit more of this to kind of mix in between it. Okay, so I've got some different colors here for my apple. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wash this down a bit. And I'm going to use my lightest value. Now with watercolor, we start with the lights and we go darker. So this will be my lightest. And we're going to check that. Yeah, that'll be fine. So we're going to use this as our lightest value. Well, you know what? Maybe I'm going to bring one that's got... No, I'm going to use this. Okay, so we're going to start with our lightest value. And I'm going to start to bring in this light value in here. And... it's going to be a little dull, so I'm going to bring a little bit more color. So this is a brighter color, so I'm going to bring this in here. Look how much brighter that is. So we're going to bring this in. Whoops. Went outside the line just a little bit, so now I'm going to have to see if I can redefine that a little bit. Okay, that's better. Then as this comes around, now again, this is my lightest value. So I'm going to go ahead and put this all in the lights as I'm trying to. Okay, and now I need to hurry because now I'm going to go into sort of my medium values. Oh shoot, I went over the highlight. So now we're going to try to put in some of the medium yellows, which is right here. So we're going to go ahead and put in these medium yellows right through here, like so. And I also need to get this wet, so we're not going to, it's not like I'm going to, you know, paint this and all done, it's all done, I got it everywhere, it's done. No, that's not the way we're going to do this. So first we're going to wet this down. And we need to get wet enough that we can actually put some paint on it. So I gotta work quick. When you're doing this, working on this apple, you've only got so much time to work on this thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring this around. Like so. And I'm twirling this brush in my hand to use different parts of the brush as I'm doing this. I'm using the back of the, or not the back, I'm using the side of the brush, I'm using the corner of the brush. I'm doing whatever I can to have this brush, you know, work for me instead of fight against me. I'm going to grab one of my round brushes now, and I come back in here again with some of this brighter paint. And I'm also going to take out any little dry areas. So I need to make sure I've got all the dry areas out of here at this point. And alright, so that's that there, that's that there. Okay, now this, as this goes around, this becomes darker before it goes into shadow. And so I need to make sure, and I keep touching my brush against my paper towel so that I don't have too much water. It's all about water control. So we're gonna go ahead and, well, that's not what I wanted, but we'll use it anyways. Bring this in. This is sort of our medium yellow, like so. We're then going to bring in our apple in shadow. We're going to bring in these shadow colors. Again, it's getting a little dry, so I'm gonna need to bring some water back in and re-wet this entire area. And I got to be quick because right now it's starting to. Again, it's starting to dry out. That's what I don't want. So again, we're gonna come in here, bring some color down in here, like so, and we're re-wetting the area. I'm also looking and glancing up to where, and usually you don't, you know, to where what I'm painting. I don't want to forget. I'm actually trying to paint something here. This isn't, you know, I'm not making this up. So I want to make sure that I'm looking up there while I'm painting with this. And I wanted to introduce a little red. I think that was too much, so I'm gonna come back in with some yellow. Maybe even. I think I'm using too small a brush. So let me grab a bigger brush so I can work in bigger chunks. There we go. And again, we want to make sure that we've got enough. Now again, this is starting to dry out again. So again, I'm going to try to make sure that I've got, again, water here everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and start washing this back down. I'm starting to get water lines through here. And so I'm going to go ahead and, now I cut right through my stem, but that's alright because the stem's going to go darker. So again, I don't have to worry about that as much. So again, I'm going to go ahead and again get this wet so that I've got water everywhere. That's the most important thing right now because that will preserve my ability to work this. Now, again, I'm using this 300-pound paper. And 300-pound paper is very absorbent. And so I got to make sure that you know, again, I can control it. I can control my my paint. So now I'm going to come down in here and I'm going to put in my middle values. There's some middle values that start up here a little bit along this edge, and then as this edge comes forward, they get lighter. So I start like that, but then as it comes forward, I'm going to make my brush thirsty. We'll call thirsty brush, and we're going to pull off some of that color. Alright, so this will give me my lights. I'm going to bring this up into here, pull some there, pull some there, pull some there. So again, we're making a thirsty brush here. So that'll be my light tones coming around here for those light values. And then from there we're going to have our middle values, which are darker. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring in some of these middle values. And again, this is wet enough now that I can do this. And that's what I want. It's wet enough that I can get away with putting in some of these wonderful colors. We need to darken it as it comes around. As it comes around here, it gets a little darker. So we're gonna bring in some of these different shifts of hue. In other words, it's shifting from the oranger yellow to the greener yellow and so forth. Now the shadow, I gotta watch the shadows, because again, shadows are drying down. In fact, those shadows look pretty dry. So I'm gonna come back in here. I gotta make sure my brush is not too wet, because if I'm not careful, I'm just gonna get blooms going everywhere. So I need to re-wet this down here so there's some water there. So I want about the same amount of water everywhere so far. Alright. Okay. And then for the, so I need to work in the shadows now. Now if you have to be a little lighter touch, that's not the word I'm looking for. If you can't get the full range of value, that's all right. You can always come in with a second layer. Remember that. We still have options. That's the word I'm looking for. Options. So if you're like, man, I can't. It's not getting dark enough like that. Just try to get the basics down. In other words, that this is shadow and this over here is in light, and that's the main thing we're trying to. It's the main thing we're trying to create, that illusion that this has a lit side and a shadow side. And so if that's not clear, then we're in trouble. But if we can do it, even if it's too light, but we can make it very clear that this is a shadow side versus a lit side, well, then we'll be fine. Where this comes together, that's usually going to be your brightest, most intense yellows. So I'm going to sort of drop in these yellows that are getting just a little bit more intense as they go around the corner. I'm going to look up there, take my eyes out of focus. These little bumps, they have a lit side and a shadow side. So I'm going to put the shadow side into them that we haven't really done just yet. I'm going to keep the shadows a bit on the lighter side, because again, if I have to do anything, I want to go darker. And it's easier to go darker, of course, than it is to try to go lighter. I'm going to bring these over. There's a little bit of getting slightly darker as it comes over what we call the shoulder. And there's a little, there's like little grooves in there, so we're going to, again, put some of that in there to show these. Okay. Again, this is getting a little bit, again, it's drying out. So again, I'm gonna make a thirsty brush, pull out some lights using that thirsty brush, come over here. Again, and you're babysitting this while it dries. We're going to again start pulling still some lights over here, right? We're going to pull some lights over here as far as that goes, because this is a little lighter side. Then we have a darker side right here for that apple. Too dark. bring in some intensity, make a thirsty brush, pull some of that back out, drop some back in. It's a process, and as long as you keep this wet, you can do this quite a bit. I was going to say all day long, that's not quite true, but you can do quite a bit of this. Now I can load some color on here, make this a semi-thirsty brush, so it's going to be pulling paint off, but it's also laying some paint down. Again, with watercolor, it's all about how much paint do I have in my brush. I mean, it's really, and if you've got enough, again, I put brighter paint in here, so I'm lifting paint. It's semi. It's almost a dry brush is what I'm using, and it's just enough that it's putting paint down while it's also moving stuff around. It's taking some stuff off of it. And again, this is where this can really start to shine. Again, I'm going to pull this paint back off, pull this paint off a little bit because again it got a little bit too. But this, I put it down because I wanted the higher intensity. And so now as I pull it off, it's going to be slightly more intense than the yellow that was there before, and that's what we're looking for. We're trying to get some. Now, if I want to, I could even come in here if I thought that, with a little paper towel, and I could actually pull with a paper towel too. So, you're going to use whatever you have to. Don't think you're gonna. Oops, that's probably I drugged the. Probably the paper towel touched right there, so I got to make sure that doesn't stay. And it might just stay because there we go. Getting a little bit light down here towards the foot. I can use a thirsty brush again to start pulling some paint up just a bit. I'm gonna look up there at my apple again, and there's gonna be a picture of the apple you can download or pull it up so you can try to do this painting. And I'm going to pull some more paint out once more. That's coming back, isn't it? That little bit, it didn't really settle the same way. And the only way to get rid of that is to try to move that paint up. But if you try to do that, that's a tough gig without destroying everything. Paint this is again semi. So we've gone from wet paper to now it's going to semi-wet paper, and I'm kind of to the point where I almost have to just leave this alone at this point. We're getting to the point where if I don't get off this paper, I'm gonna wreck this drawing, wreck this painting, and obviously I don't want to destroy the painting that I'm taking all this time to paint. So the other part of watercolor that really, and again, I threw that yellow in there, and then I'm pulling it back off because it's leaving a little bit of that lighter yellow behind, and I was wanting some of that over here. I'm going to do the same thing up here a little bit. I'm going to get this paint that's a little bit more lemony. Whoops, that's too much water. So that was too much water, but I'm going to bring this in here. It seems almost too hot. In other words, very, very intense. So I got to be careful where I put it, but then I'm going to pull it back off. So again, it leaves some of that sort of that hotter yellow in some areas, and some other areas it'll stay a little bit darker. And I'm going to actually do a little bit of taking some of this, coming back in here, using some of this. So I'm going to try to see if I can get it somewhere between the two for this middle value. Yeah, this is getting dry. I gotta get off of this now. And so we're going to come back and do one more layer to pull this all together. That's what we're going to have to do. So the other thing, while this is starting to dry a little bit in here, again, bringing a little bit more of this intensity back on over into here, just a scotch. I'm going to take a semi-wet brush. I'm going to stroke around here just a little bit, see if I can soften these up just a scotch. And like that. Now we're going to go ahead and let this dry. And we're going to come back in here with a second layer. And so I was talking about I would do that here. Well, we're going to actually do this on this apple here. We're going to have to bump the contrast, get a little bit nicer color going on. And so we're going to go ahead and step away, let this dry out completely before we then come over here with a second layer. So again, go ahead and take a break. We'll come back and we'll get this thing taken care of. All right, so we're going to get back in on this, try to finish up this little apple here. Now sometimes you'll get these little, like I was zipping through this. Sometimes on something like this, if it's a lighter area, you can cover with, because this is going to happen, you're going to get little spatters. So if you can mask off areas, to keep them clean. But if you have something that like that happens, depending on the paint, depending on the pigment, but you can either leave that again towards the end and scrape it with a razor blade, or you can come in here, you can try to see if you can pick up some of that. So, that's not going to come out any more than that, so I'm going to have to, oh, that came out quite a bit. What about this over here? Yeah. So just this one over here is going to be the one that's, again, you'd come in here when it's dry, and again, you can take that out with a razor blade and lighten it up as you scrape just little bits of away. You wait to the very end of a painting before you do that. You don't do it in the middle. It's always towards the very end. So we're going to come back in here and we're going to go ahead and re-wet the entire apple. Again, I'm gonna drag this brush, and I want it to almost be at the almost parallel to the surface. That way, I'm having as little friction as possible. I don't want to pick up that paint. So again, I'm going to go ahead and wet this down. like so. And I'm leaning back and forth to see if I can see any places that aren't glistening, because I don't want to keep any dry areas. As far as that goes. Okay. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work just in the where the shadow and the light come together. And I'm trying to put in, like, usually again the yellow will kind of shine a little bit before it drops into shadow, and so I'm trying to bring in some of a little more intensity coming around, you know, sort of a little brighter yellow before it drops again into shadow. So that's what I'm doing right now along the edge, and then I come in here with our core shadow, which is the absolute darkest in the shadows. Like so. Okay. You get another brush, a little round, so I can come down here around the foot a little bit. Okay. Like so. All right. I'm ready to come over here, darken this just a little bit more, a couple places in the shadows. Now, something to understand about when the thing is wet. If it's, there's an old ad, because watercolor gets is lighter as it dries. There's an old adage that if it's the color you want when it's wet, it won't be the color you want when it's dry. So you're always going to try to darken the color a little bit more by a little bit, so that when it dries, it will be the color that you're wanting when it does finally dry out. Alright, so this is going to dry lighter. Couple of key areas. Oops. All right. All right. So we're also gonna, since we've done that, gonna look around to see if we got any other places. Now, again, it's getting to the point where I kind of need to leave it alone. So again, I'm gonna, there's a couple places where I've got some some shadows that I think I can just drop it in. And then I'm going to let this dry down again. So we're going to go into it a third time. Third time's the charm and all that. Okay, I'm gonna get this one up here. I'm gonna see if I can pull just a little bit more of these lights up here up top. So I'm gonna get a fairly dry brush, and I can also, if I need to, I can come in here with a paper towel. See if we can lighten a little bit more that way too. Much more absorbent than a brush is. Now I'm dabbing it. You want to be very careful that you don't get too aggressive with this, because if I start dragging it, it's going to really tear up that paper if I'm not careful. So we don't want that, to be sure. Up there. We're going to get, just again, using the paper towel to absorb, and by absorbing the paint, it's making it lighter, giving us a little bit more light to dark, which is a good thing. Alright, so we're gonna let this dry down. And we're going to come in one more time to try to get this finished up. Probably even going to do a little dry brushing towards the end, but again, take a break, let this dry down, come back, and we'll get this finished. Alright, so we're going to do a little bit of, I think we're going to do a little glazing here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my lighter yellow. Now you can only do this with yellow, cad yellow. It's slightly opaque, so it will actually lighten things up just a scotch. Again, you can't, you can't use it like opaque paint. But what this is going to do is it's going to cover over that yellow and shift it slightly and lighten it just slightly, and really just make it more intense. So we can use this to soften some of these transition points, like through here, where it's going, getting lighter as it comes up. And again, it's just going to give us a little more intensity. We've lost a bit of the intensity in here, and this is such a lovely, a lovely yellow, and it's a shame that we've lost it. So we're going to come back in here, and we're not putting it everywhere. We're just putting it where the dark transitions into a much lighter, and to give it just again a little bit more intensity. I'm going to bring some of this down through here, again just a little bit, and this will again just brighten this, make it a little brighter, make it a little more intense. It will brighten it up, is what I was going to say. So that's nice. Now it's going to sink in as it dries, so right now it looks a little brighter than what it will be. I'm going to also take a little bit of this yellow that's a little oranger, and do the same thing. It's also a cadmium, so it will make things just a little bit brighter as I cover over a couple places with this. Where we've lost some of that those wonderful yellows. Okay. So I thought we were going to do a little bit more washes, but I don't think so. We're going to do some of this. This is really dry brushing. I'm going over dry paper, and all we're trying to do is give ourselves just a little bit more richness in these transition places from shadow to light. And again, this can really be a game changer, how skillfully you use this. is it can be quite extraordinary what it does to, like this is a little bit darker, so I'm mixing it darker. I'm still using some of the cadmium, but I'm using some of my yellow ochre, which darkens it. Yellow ochre is also opaque, so it's going to cover, and again I'll come back into this transition area where it's going into shadow to just give it again a little more richness before it turns to shadow, but it's not as bright as the other stuff because now we're into the dark middle values. So again, we're going to come over the edge just a little bit into what's supposed to be the shadows. Now I'm also going to do some glazing. I'm going to grab a round and using my burnt umber and maybe a little bit of yellow. Again, we're going to come over, this is a little dull, so we're going to come over and glaze this with this little bit of brown. It's too much of an edge there, so I'm going to just hit it with a little bit of water so it bleeds in just a little bit. Then I'm going to get my smaller brush here, and I'm going to get a little bit more of sort of this green I've got left over and some of the brown, and I'm going to start to bring in some down on here on the feet. Again, we get some of these places that are in shadow that haven't quite been addressed, and they look a little strange. So we're going to deal with that just a scotch, like so. This needs to go down a little bit. It needs to be a little darker through there because I can't tell if it's shadow or light. If I can't tell if it's shadow or light, that's an issue. That's a problem. Okay. Where that hits through there, again, we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of this yellow and a little bit of water and see if we can just transition that just a little bit. Softening that edge with just a little bit of water is all we're doing. Again, I think I can come over here and soften this up a little bit. Now I'm going to try to see if I can get just a little bit more out of this. See if I can pull just a little bit more right here. And again, this is a little bit of opaque painting. We're fudging, I mean, because watercolor is fairly translucent, but we can use just a little bit of, see that yellow is brighter than that brown I just went over. And so it's going to cover it, just as not cover it all the way, but it's going to cover it enough that it's going to make it look brighter. So I can weave in some of this bit of paint to make this apple look much better than it would if I didn't do this. So I can get a little bit more of this yellow orange. And now I'm actually just using, again, dry brushing, little strokes. And then a little bit more water and a little bit more water to put a little sort of light patch through there. And again, just to get a little bit lighter value through there. I'm gonna wet this down right here, and then I'm gonna see if I can take off just a little bit more with my paper towel. Give me a little bit more contrast right there, so this goes back and this comes forward. I like that. I think that's working. So watercolor, again, this is really the fun part for watercolor, where we're just bumping it around. We're making it just a little brighter contrast here, a little brighter paint color through there, and this is what gives the painting some life as it starts to really start to live. Try to pull this out just a little bit more through there, like so. It's looking pretty good, really. There's a little bit of this down here that could use just a little bit of opacity, just a scotch. Gonna come in here now. This edge is a little not uniform enough, so I'm gonna come in here. There's a little bit that went outside the edge, and I'll probably take care of that with a razor blade. once it's good and dry. I think even this one's got a couple of water edges. I'm going to see if I can soften it and work them just right now. Okay, yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, okay. This has kind of got a stripe right through there. I'm going to see if I can squint my eye and put it seems like it's a little bit light too, so I'm going to go ahead and glaze it with just a little bit of. Now I'm using a semi-wet brush to glaze that down. We're trying to push it down a little bit more. And I think we'll do just a little bit more right here, same thing. Push it down just a bit more. I think we're going to glaze it right through here a little bit. Just a scotch. Let's see, what else can we get? What else can we do? Alright, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to take my little thin brush. I'm going to try to see if I can pop this right where it goes against that darker edge. And see if I can do some dry brushing again with this yellow, and it can just clean that edge up just a bit. Which again is all we're trying to do. We're just trying to clean it just a bit. Alright. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. Trim it with this cadmium, which will cover just a tiny bit of what's there. Like so. Alright. Now again, I'm going to get get a damp paper. I'm going to come over here with this little damp paper, paper towel. I'm going to use it like a drawing tool. Just a bit, just a scotch. And that's what we're doing. Again, we're just trying to, get this looking a little better and a little better and a little better, and that's how this works. You grab this again, get it a little wet. Come over here just a little bit more. See if I can pull just a little bit more out of there. Just a scotch. Alright. I don't think it looks too bad. No, it's kind of, there's this yellow here that we need to soften, so this brush is semi-wet. Well, it's fairly dry. It's not semi-wet. It's probably almost like a dry brush, but there's just enough water that I can move around the moisture that I just put down there and soften that edge. And again, this is how we can really get this. Again, I pulled out just a little bit more. I actually used a little bit more force with that, and we can get a little bit more aggressive now that we kind of know where we're going if I needed to. But again, when I say aggressive, I mean for watercolor. I'm not scrubbing this. I don't want to do that. But I do want to just lighten a couple of areas here to get just a little bit more of the feeling of the values and shapes that are happening on that apple that I'm looking at. And this thing is starting to feel like it's got some depth. It's starting to feel like it's got some form. There's another area through here where it kind of has a little bump indentation. So it gets slightly darker there for just a moment. And I might try to come in here with just a, again, this is dry brushing, but all we're trying to do is try to darken just a little bit to show that it's got this little, getting that little bump right there. And so I just darkened it just slightly, and then if you need to, you can come in here with another brush and then lighten just the other side of it just a bit. Now, gotta be careful because that's down in the dark, so we don't want to lighten it too much. So I'm using I've got a brush slightly wet, but I'm using, you know, very little pressure because I don't want to use too much, to lighten it just a bit through this side of it, so it starts to feel like it's a little bit lighter there. I can do the same thing on this side where it's going to be getting lighter as it rounds up over here a little bit more, like so. There, I can come over here where it's going around a little more paint. Like so. And this is, again, is how we're going to get these nuances. So I'm pretty much done with the apple. I think, again, I could come over here and re-wet this area and pull this together with just a wash or two. I'm not going to bore you while I'm doing that. I'm going to do more of these videos, and we'll do much more complex things where I'm going to be working the whole area a whole lot more. We're just going to do the stem. And so, again, we start with watercolor. We start lighter, going darker. And so, again, I would come over here with this stem. And the stem has a lot of red-brown to it, so we'd come in here and we glaze the lighter red-brown areas of our stem. Let's see, this comes around here. And the most important thing whenever we're painting is what's the value. The values are always where the answers are when we're painting. So what's the value, what's the shape? What's the value, what's the shape? It's the most important thing. So that's some of the lighter values in that stem. And then we're going to come over here for some of the darker values in the stem. So we have a little bit darker sort of red-brown. So I'm going to use a burnt umber. Probably too much water, so I'm going to pull out extra water by rolling it right through here, and then I'm going to go ahead darken a couple places with this. Right through there. Alright, so we're going to come back in here. Like so. And then we're going to come in here with the darkest darks. So I'm going to take a little bit of green with the red and the brown, and a little bit of the Payne's gray. Holding my breath a little while I'm doing some of these long strokes. And so that's the apple. Again, if I thought that I needed it, this would be the last time. Again, I'd be doing pretty much dry brushing, but I could bring in some, try to clean up this shape right through here. Like so. And then we're going to clean up this a little bit over here. All right, I think we're looking. I think it's looking pretty good. I think we're going to go ahead and call this one done. So again, there is a, you know, if I had more time, again, if I was doing this for a competition, I might work on softening some of these edges through here. There's some edges through here that may need to be softened. I could pull all those together by putting down a wash of water, and then leaving it alone. It will kind of soften all the edges a little bit. For the most part, this is reading like an apple, which is what we want here. Maybe there's one last thing to do, and that is this thing on the bottom. The foot of this apple is turning away into shadow, and I can't tell that. So we're going to go ahead and do this here. So you'd certainly do that. You'd also have where the apple touches, that gets really, really dark. So again, we could bring our Payne's Gray in here and try to really darken that down for our occlusion shadow. Now, so there's just a couple things. Again, we're cleaning up edges at this point. If this got too tight, like that edge gets too much, again, I can take a little bit of this and just soften it out. Like so. And then maybe just use pure water and soften it again, like so. Again, so this is how we're gonna execute a watercolor. I want you to try to, you know, pull up the video after watching this. If this was too tight, again, I could take this edge out. This highlight's a little harsh. Again, we could put water all the way around this, and I could take my paper towel and I could stroke this just very gently, so I can soften that edge. So you know, just a little bit, and so you can do things like that where I might leave one edge harder and the other edge softer. This is the way we can really make our watercolor sing. But again, try to download the apple or pull it up, and then try to do a painting of or a watercolor of this apple, and you know, have fun being creative. I wish you all the best. All right, you have a good one. Bye bye now.